Hi guys, and welcome to another in the series of the Apex how-to videos. Today we're going to look at how to assemble, string and set up for shooting a takedown recurve bow. First of all, let's have a look at the parts of the bow. This part is called the riser. Now this can be made of wood or metal, and it's the middle of the bow. It's the part that the archer holds in their hand. Then you'll have a pair of limbs. So these are recurve limbs. They already have a slight curve into them, which gives a little bit more power than traditional longbows would. And you have a string, so the bowstring, very important, and two bolts to attach the limbs to the riser. Now, depending on the brand or the model of bow you order, you may well have a stringer in the set. You might have an arrow rest or a hair rest. Now, it's very important when you're buying your bow, make sure that you find out whether there's a stringer included in the kit, because a bowstring is really important. It's the best way for putting the string on the bow without risking damaging the bow or any personal injury. Okay, so to set up the bow, first thing we need to do is identify the two limbs, because there will be a top and a bottom limb. Now this is a Samick Sage. Samick only actually put writing on one limb, and that's the bottom limb. But depending on which brand you have, you might have writing on both limbs, but generally the limb that has the bow's weight, draw weight on it, that will be the bottom limb. So first of all, we'll take the bottom limb and line it up with the riser. You'll see there's a hole in the limb and a hole in the riser. If you line those two up, take one of the bolts, and then we just screw down on the bolt, attaching the limb to the riser of the bow. So it just needs to be just over finger tight. Doesn't, you don't need to go and get the mole grips out and tighten it down too hard. And then top limb. Alright, so that's both limbs attached to the bow, and you can see that the limb curves away from the bow as you're holding it, which is the correct setup. One of the most common mistakes we see for people who are new to archery is they set up the bow with the limbs the wrong way around. They think of a bow as being like a D shape, so this kind of looks natural to some people, but having the limbs facing towards you, that's not right. That's not how your bow should look. Your bow should look like this, with the limbs curving away from you. Okay, so now the limbs are on the bow, the next thing we do is we need to get the string ready to be strung. When you have a look at your string, you'll see that there are two different size loops. There's a larger loop and a smaller loop. Now the larger loop is to go over the top limb of the bow. So the first thing we do is we slide the large loop over the tip of the upper limb and slide it about halfway down. Secondly, get the smaller loop and just put it over the tip of the bow and make sure that it sits nicely in the groove on the tip of the bow. Pull the string slightly so that it sits in the channel at the end of the bow, and then slide the loop up the top limb, and we're ready to get the stringer and string the bow. Now I'm using a stringer. I'm using a saddle stringer. Now there's different types of stringers. Some will go over the tips of the bow, some will sit on the limb of the bow. So this is a saddle stringer. It's designed to sit on the limb of the bow. So to use the stringer, what I do first of all is put the cup end onto the lower limb, and then the saddle end needs to go over the top limb and lower down than the string. Okay, to string the bow, what we need to do is put the stringer on the floor, stand on the stringer, about shoulder width apart, thereabouts. Don't worry, you won't have a microphone cable at home, so it'll be a little bit easier for you. Make sure the saddle is about halfway on the top limb, and then pull up with gentle pressure on the bow and maneuver the large loop over the tip of the bow. Just double check that the string is in the grooves on the top and bottom limbs. Alright, so that's the bow strung. Now before we can actually shoot the bow, we need to check the brace height. Now the brace height is measured from the throat of the grip to the string. Now every bow will be slightly different, so check your manufacturer's specifications, make sure you know what your brace height is, and then with a tape measure, just basically measure. Okay, and that's about 7 5/8 of an inch. So that's actually within the tolerance for this bow. So that doesn't need changing. If you were outside your brace height, then we need to unstring the bow and add twists or remove twists from the string to adjust the brace height. Assuming I did need to change the brace height of the bow, I would need to unstring it. So again, we stand on the stringer, gentle pressure in the middle of the bow, have the saddle of the stringer halfway up the limb, gentle pressure up, move the loop down, and that's the bow unstrung. Okay, to adjust the brace height, all we need to do is simply remove the small loop from the bottom limb and then either put twists into the string or take twists out of the string. So if we want to increase the brace height, we need to shorten the string, and that involves putting twists in. So all we do is simply twist 1, 2, 3, 4, then put the loop back onto the tip of the bow, making sure it's in the channel underneath, and then we go and restring the bow and measure the brace height again. Keep doing this until you get the correct brace height. Takes a little bit of trial and error, but it's definitely going to make your bow work best. Alright, so now that your bow's strung, you're happy with the brace height, everything's set there. What we need to do now to get it ready for shooting is to add a couple of things to it. First of all, we need a rest so that the arrow has something to sit on. Now there's a couple of different rests. You can either use a hair or a felt rest, which is the sort of traditional way of shooting where you're shooting off the shelf of the bow, or you can use a screw-in leaf rest or maybe a stick-on spring rest. Now with timber bows, we always recommend using the hair or the felt rest, which is designed for feathered fletched arrows, and most timber bows are cut to center, so to get the best shot out of the bow, it is advisable to shoot off the shelf. Now there's a couple of things that you're going to need to set the knocking clips in the right place. We recommend the use of a bow square, very useful for actually getting the knocking clip in the right place, and obviously for putting the knocking clip on, we've got knocking clip pliers. Right, the first thing we're going to do is install the rest. You have to do this first, because to set the right height for the knocking clips, you have to have the arrow sitting at the right sort of height above the shelf. Now we're going to use a hair rest. Now what we've done is we've already cut this rest down to shape so that it'll fit the bow nicely. So the first thing to do is we take the backing plate, remove the sticky from the backing plate, and put that on the sort of apex of the shelf at the highest point, so that it's definitely going to be in the right position for the arrow. Then remove the backing material on the hair rest. Now an important thing with the hair rest, if you feel it, the felt actually runs in one direction. So we've cut this already, but before you cut it, make sure that the felt is running away from you so that the arrow travels over the felt nice and easily without sort of getting resistance from the felt itself. Okay, so we just remove the backing material to expose the adhesive, and then line it up and press it onto the shelf of the bow. Okay, and there we are. So now we're going to install the knocking clip. So for this, I'm going to need my knocking clip pliers, and I'm going to need some knocking clips, and I'm going to need my bow square. Now there's a bit of debate out there as to whether you use one knocking clip or two, and that really depends on how well the arrow clicks onto your string. So I've got an arrow here. This is the arrow I'm going to be shooting with this bow, and as you can see, there's a little bit of play. The arrow doesn't actually click onto the string and hold very tightly. So for this arrow, I'm going to choose to use 2 knocking clips. So to set the first knocking clip, take our bow square, click the bow square onto the string, and slide the bow square down the string until it touches where the arrow will sit on the rest. So what we need to do is we need to install the first clip. Now what we recommend is 3/8 of an inch or 9.5 millimeters in metric, and we'll install the first knocking clip on the string with our knocking clip pliers and pinch that down. Okay. Remove the bow square. Now to make sure the second knocking clip goes in the right place, I'm going to use my arrow. Click the arrow on. Snug it up to the knocking clip. Now the second knocking clip needs to go below. Now you don't want to have it tight onto the arrow. It needs to be a little tiny bit of wiggle room. Maybe 1/2 mil, not very much at all, but it needs to have just a little tiny bit of wiggle room. And again, clamp that down So there's a little tiny bit of wiggle room, and those are your 2 knocking clips installed. Okay, so now the bow's set up. The knocking clips are installed, the rest is installed, and you're ready to go and have a shoot. Always remember, shoot safely, but more importantly, have fun. Thank you for watching the Apex how-to video on setting up a recurve bow.